Rooted Readiness. Episode 2. The Perimeter Test. A decision made in layers. I did not need anyone to tell me that the safe place was getting smaller. I could feel it in the way the campground had gone quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Watchful quiet. The kind that means everyone is listening for the same thing, and nobody wants to be the first to name it. Featuring Rachel Sinclair and Shelby, an Eddie's on the Move production. 4:17 in the morning. I know the time because I checked, and I checked because the dark has a different weight when you are planning a route you might need to drive under conditions you cannot fully predict. It matters whether you have 4 hours until dawn or 2. 4 hours is enough to plan. 2 hours is enough to second guess. Shelby was awake. She does that. When I move from sleeping to thinking without passing through the usual slow transition of yawning and stretching, she knows. Her head came up off the floor mat before my feet touched it. She did not follow me to the dining table. She watched me from the bedroom doorway with her ears forward, cataloging whatever she catalogs in those moments when my energy shifts and she has to decide whether we are in routine or response. We were in neither. We were in planning. I had the trucker's atlas open under the headlamp, the same one I had used to find this campground 2 weeks ago. The coordinates from the spot message were plotted in pencil on a page I had already studied 3 times since yesterday afternoon, and each time I studied it, the route told me something different. Not because the roads had changed, because I was asking better questions. The primary route ran northeast along state highways, 214 miles to the foothills. Under normal conditions, a single day in the diesel pusher with the Tahoe in tow. Under current conditions, I was estimating 2 days. Not because the distance was greater. Because the unknown variables had multiplied, and I do not drive a 40-foot rig into unknowns without margin. I marked the primary route in pencil. Then I marked the alternate. The alternate added 41 miles but avoided 2 towns I had flagged based on the GMRS traffic Diane had been logging. Towns talk on the radio the same way companies talk in internal memos when they are under stress. They start using language that sounds reasonable until you listen for what is underneath it. Prioritizing local residents sounds like good governance. It sounds different when you're driving a rig with out-of-state plates through a town that has decided outsiders are part of the problem. I closed the atlas and sat with it. The math was not complicated. The campground was stable, the reservoir was reliable. Diane and I had built something that worked. But works and sustainable are different words, and I have spent 25 years watching organizations confuse the two. The message from East Tennessee offered something this campground could not. Community at scale, verified water. People with skills who had chosen to be there rather than people who happened to be in the same place when the music stopped. That is not a small distinction. A community of intention operates differently than a community of circumstance, and I have consulted for enough of both to know which one survives its first real disagreement. The question was whether the road between here and there was still a road. I was going to answer it by watching what this campground told me over the next 24 hours. 5:45. The sky had that pre-dawn quality I have always liked. The one that is not yet light, but is no longer willing to be called dark. November. In this part of the country means you feel the cold before you see it. I pulled on the layers I keep staged by the door for exactly this purpose and clipped Shelby's leash. She was ready before I was. She always is. We took the perimeter walk. This had become the architecture of my mornings over the past week, and I had come to treat it the way I treated operational audits for clients. You walk the same path at the same time, and you pay attention to what has changed, because the things that change between yesterday and today are the things that are trying to tell you something. The paracord perimeter was intact. The small bells I had strung at irregular intervals along the tree line were undisturbed. These are not sophisticated security measures. They are information at the speed of sound, which is faster than information at the speed of Wi-Fi, when the Wi-Fi is unreliable and the sound just needs to travel 30 feet to a woman who sleeps light and a dog who sleeps lighter. The retired couple's fifth wheel was still dark, normal for this hour. Their pattern was consistent: lights on around 7, coffee outside by 7:30 if the weather permitted, curtains drawn by 9 in the evening. I had not asked for their schedule. I had observed it because a pattern you can predict is a pattern you can notice when it breaks. The truck camper at the far end of the loop was where it had been since day 5. The man who occupied it had maintained a consistent distance from everyone else in the campground, which I had initially read as introversion or preference. I was beginning to read it differently, not as avoidance, but as observation. He was watching the campground the same way I was watching the campground, and the fact that I recognized the behavior did not make me more comfortable with it. It made me less comfortable, because it meant he was operating from a methodology, not a mood. The camper had never been detached from the truck. 5 days in one site and the corner jacks had not touched the ground. Most people who stay more than a night separate the camper and use the truck independently. It frees the vehicle for errands, levels the living space properly, and signals a certain comfort with being stationary. He had done none of that. The camper was still sitting on the truck bed exactly as it had arrived, which meant he could start the engine and be gone in under a minute. That is either anxiety or planning, and both of those deserved my attention. I completed the loop and returned to the rig. The campground was holding its breath the way the whole region seemed to be holding its breath, and I had been in enough rooms where everyone was holding their breath to know that it never lasts. Someone always exhales first, and you want to be the one who decides when that happens, not the one who is startled by the sound. 6:30. Fire ring, coffee. I do not make coffee inside the rig when propane conservation matters and the weather permits an open flame. The fire ring serves double duty. It heats the water and it announces my presence to the campground in a way that says routine rather than alert. Smoke from a morning fire is the oldest signal of normalcy that humans know how to read, and I use it deliberately. Diane's van door opened at 6:42. She walked to my fire ring without greeting me first, which was not rudeness, it was efficiency. We had established a rhythm that did not require pleasantries as a prerequisite for communication, and that economy was one of the things I valued most about her. She sat down across from me with her coffee and her notebook. The notebook was new. She had started keeping one after watching me document everything for the first week, and I had not told her to do it. She had seen the methodology and adopted it on her own, which told me more about her operational instincts than anything she had said out loud. I logged 3 new voices on the GMRS last night, she said. 2 were passing through. 1 was local. I waited. The local one was asking about road conditions south, specifically whether the bridge on 74 was still open. That registered. The bridge on 74 was on my primary route. Did anyone answer? Someone said it was open yesterday, then the channel went quiet. Open yesterday is not the same as open today. It is not even the same as open yesterday. It is one person's report filtered through whatever they saw from whatever angle they saw it at whatever time they happened to pass through. But it was data, and I would take data over silence. I opened the atlas on the camp table between us and turned to the page I had marked that morning. The primary route, the alternate. The 41 miles of additional distance that might be the difference between a smooth transit and a confrontation with a town that has decided it does not want visitors. I'm going, I said. I have the fuel range with margin. The primary and alternate routes are mapped. I can make it in 2 days with an overnight stop at a rest area or a pullout wide enough for the rig. Diane looked at the atlas. Not at me. That is how she processes. Eyes on the data, not the person presenting it. What's the fuel situation on the road? Unknown. I have just under 3/4 of a tank in the pusher. Call it 67 gallons after the run from the last position, plus the 8-gallon reserve. At 7 miles per gallon, that gives me somewhere around 500 miles of pusher range before I need a station. The route is 214 on the primary, 255 on the alternate. Either way, I arrive with more than half a tank. And if the stations are dark? Then I arrive with less margin, but I arrive. She was quiet. I let the quiet sit. This was not a negotiation. I was not asking her to come. I was telling her I was going because she deserved to know and because the partnership we had built over the past 10 days required honesty about my intentions, even when those intentions meant leaving a position we had built together. "You don't need me for this," she said, not a question. "No, I don't." That is a hard sentence to say to someone who has become your operational partner in a crisis. It sounds dismissive, and I did not intend it to be. I intended it to be the truth because the truth was the only currency I had that was not depreciating. But capable alone and better together are not opposites. They are layers. "If you want to come," I said, "you bring the van, your fuel, your supplies. We convoy. We do not carpool." She looked up from the atlas. "Convoy. You follow or you lead, depending on the road. We stay within visual range. We check in on the GMRS at set intervals. And if either one of us runs into something that changes the calculation, we reassess. Together if we can, independently if we have to." "I need to think about it," she said. "I know. That's why I'm telling you now and not at first light tomorrow." We sat with the atlas between us and the fire dying down, and the campground waking up around us in the slow, cautious way it woke up every morning now. Not with the cheerful bustle of recreational campers starting their vacation day, with the measured movements of people who are listening before they act. I checked the GMRS one more time. The channel was quiet. The bridge on 74 was open yesterday. Today was not yesterday. Diane left for town at 8:15. This was not impulsive. We had discussed it over the second round of coffee, after the GMRS check, and after I had shared the route options from the atlas. The town was 11 miles east, and Diane's van could make the round trip on fumes she would not miss. The purpose was intelligence, not supplies, not socializing, not the restless need to move that hits people in a crisis when sitting still starts to feel like surrender. Intelligence. What are the stores doing? What are the gas stations doing? What are the people doing? And most importantly, what are the people saying when they think nobody is cataloging it? Diane was good at this. Her hospital logistics background had given her a particular talent for walking into a stressed environment, reading the operational state of it in minutes, and reporting back with the kind of clean, sequential detail that I could actually use. She did not editorialize. She did not catastrophize. She observed systems and told you what they were doing. I did not go with her. That was deliberate. Someone stays with the rig. Someone stays with the campground. Someone stays with the sight lines and the cameras and the perimeter and the dog who is better at reading the space than either of us when the space is quiet and the variables are human. That someone was me, not because I do not trust Diane to hold the position, but because the rig is mine. The systems are mine. And I do not leave what is mine in someone else's care when the world is uncertain, no matter how much I trust the someone. That is not a slight against Diane. That is a statement about who I am. 9:20. The campground settled into its daytime pattern. No one was grilling, no one was walking to the reservoir with a fishing rod. The retired couple had their awning out, but their chairs were angled toward the campground entrance rather than toward the water. You do not angle your chair toward a view you are not watching. I was working at the camp table under the awning. The meridian dish was deployed, and I was in the early window of what had become a roughly 4-hour daily cycle of functional satellite internet. Documentation uploads to cloud backup. Weather data pull for the next 72 hours. A scan of whatever news sources were still updating, which were fewer each day and increasingly vague in the way that official sources become vague when the truth is more disruptive than the silence. Shelby was beneath the camp table, not dozing, resting with intention the way she does when she has decided the immediate environment is secure, but the broader situation has not earned her full relaxation. Her chin was on her paws and her eyes were open. Every few minutes, she would lift her head and orient toward something I could not see or hear, hold for 3 or 4 seconds, then settle again. The truck camper had not moved. No activity at his site since I checked at dawn. The curtain on the cab over was drawn. His corner jacks never came down. I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet and let the image sit in my peripheral vision while I worked. Not staring, monitoring. There is a difference, and it matters because staring is a reaction and monitoring is a system. 1041. The pop-up camper. 2 rows over, the one I had cataloged on arrival as unoccupied. Awning retracted, no vehicle alongside, no sign of habitation for the entire 2 weeks I had been here. It had been part of the background, scenery, the kind of thing your eyes skip over because it has not changed and your brain has filed it under resolved. The door was open, not swinging in the wind, not ajar from a latch failure, open. The kind of open that means a hand turned a handle and pulled. No vehicle had arrived. I would have seen it on the cameras, and if I had missed it, Shelby would not have. I set down my pen. I did not stand up. I did not walk over. I sat with the observation and let it become data before I let it become action. There are 3 explanations for a closed door becoming an open door when no vehicle has arrived and no person has been visible. Wind, mechanical failure, or a person who arrived on foot. The wind was negligible. I could see the flag on the camp host pole hanging limp, and the bells on my paracord perimeter had not stirred all morning. Mechanical failure on a camper latch is possible, but unlikely to produce a fully open door rather than a door slightly ajar, which left a person on foot, and a person on foot in a campground where vehicle access is the norm raises a question that I was not going to answer by walking over and looking inside. I checked the camera feeds. The pop-up was at the edge of my coverage area. The nearest camera caught a partial view of the site, enough to confirm the door was open, but not enough to show me when it opened or what, if anything, had moved inside. I pulled the atlas toward me and opened it to the campground sketch I had made during my first week. The pop-up was between my position and the truck camper's position, not directly between, offset by about 40 yards to the south. But if you were walking from the truck camper's site toward the reservoir or the tree line, the pop-up was on a natural path. The kind of path you would take if you were moving through the campground on foot and wanted to stay off the gravel road where footsteps announce themselves. I wrote the time in my notebook. 10:41, pop-up door open, no vehicle, no visible person, wind negligible. I underlined no visible person because that was the part that mattered. Then I went back to work, not because it was unimportant, because the most useful thing I could do was maintain the appearance of routine while increasing the frequency of my camera checks from every 30 minutes to every 10. If someone was in that camper, they would either leave or they would stay, and either action would tell me something. What I was not going to do was walk across an open campground alone toward an anomaly I could not explain, leaving my rig unattended and my sightlines behind me. That is how people get hurt, not by the dramatic threat, by the small lapse in discipline that puts them in the wrong position at the wrong moment. I have watched companies make that mistake with catastrophic results. Walk toward the thing that does not make sense without first securing what you already hold, and you lose both. 12:15. The sun was as high as November would allow it, which was not high but was enough to make the campground feel exposed. The truck camper showed its first activity of the day at 11:08. The man had stepped out, walked to the spigot at the edge of his site, filled a water jug, and returned inside. Total time visible, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I timed it because I time things. He did not look toward the pop-up. I noted that specifically because of how specifically he did not look toward it. There is a difference between not noticing something and choosing not to look at something, and the difference lives in the neck. A person who does not notice something moves naturally past it. A person who is choosing not to look holds their head at a slightly unnatural angle to keep the thing out of their sight line. It is subtle. You have to be watching for it. I was watching for it. I filed it. Insufficient to act on, sufficient to log. 2:17. Diane was late. Not late by any standard we had formally set. We had not established a return time because establishing a return time implies a search and rescue trigger, and we were not there yet. But her pattern over 3 previous town runs was consistent. Depart between 8 and 9, return between 1 and 2. She had been out for 6 hours now, and the additional 2 hours sat in my awareness like a change in air pressure before weather. I had options for reaching her. I did not use them. If the situation in town was straightforward, she would return when she returned, and the extra time meant nothing more than a longer line at a store or a conversation that ran long. If it was not straightforward, a message implying concern could change how she moved, and I did not want to alter her behavior based on a 2-hour variance from a pattern we had never formally set. I would wait. Waiting is also a decision. Instead, I did what I do. I worked. I documented. I checked the cameras every 10 minutes. I watched the pop-up door, which had not changed. I watched the truck camper, which had not changed. I watched Shelby, who had repositioned again, this time to the front of the rig near the steps, facing the campground entrance. She was watching for the van. I was watching for the van too, but I was watching for everything else first. 3:41, the van. Diane pulled into the campground at a speed that told me something before she parked. Not fast, not slow, controlled. The speed of someone who has information and is managing her body's response to it while operating a vehicle. I have seen that speed in boardrooms when a CFO walks in with quarterly numbers that are going to change the room. They walk normally, they sit normally, they open the folder normally, and then they speak, and nothing is normal after that. She parked at her site, 3 spots away. She did not come to my fire ring immediately. She went inside her van first. 3 minutes. When she emerged, she had her notebook and a canvas bag that was lighter than usual. I could tell by the way it hung from her shoulder. She walked to my site and sat down in the chair she had been sitting in that morning. And the fact that it was still there, still angled toward the atlas, still holding the shape of our earlier conversation, gave the moment a continuity that I found steadying. "Tell me," I said. Diane did not start with the bad news. She started with the structure, and that told me she had already processed what she saw and organized it for delivery. I appreciated that more than I could express in the moment. When someone brings you intelligence in a crisis, how they present it tells you as much about their state of mind as the content itself. Frantic people lead with the worst thing. Analytical people lead with the framework. Diane led with the framework.
3 stores open: the grocery, the hardware, and the farm supply on Route 9. The pharmacy was closed. Handwritten sign on the door. No explanation, no return date. The dollar store was open when I arrived and closed while I was still in the parking lot. The woman who locked the door said they were out of what people were coming for, so there was no point.
I did not interrupt. When Diane reports, you let her finish. The questions come after.
The grocery is cash only. Has been for 4 days according to the cashier, who volunteered that information without being asked, which means she has said it enough times that it has become her opening line. Stock is thin but not empty. Canned goods are picked over. Produce section has gaps that tell you the supply chain is stuttering, not stopped. Bread was available, dairy was available, but the dates were close, which means the rotation is slowing. Meat counter was half what it should be.
She paused to check her notebook.
Prices have not changed. That surprised me. I expected gouging. What I got was a store operating on muscle memory, selling things at the price the computer set before the computer stopped mattering. The cashier is using a calculator and a handwritten ledger. She is doing this accurately and without complaint, and I found that both impressive and unsettling, because it means the store has made a decision to keep functioning past the point where the systems that supported functioning have failed. That is either resilience or denial.
I could see it clearly. Resilience and denial are not opposites in a degrading system. They coexist. The store keeps selling because selling is what it does, and the people who work there keep showing up because the alternative is sitting at home watching the same walls they were watching yesterday. The routine is the point. Until the routine becomes impossible, and then the transition from functional to closed happens faster than anyone expects because nobody planned for it. They just stopped being able to pretend. Fuel, I said.
2 stations open out of 4. Both have fuel. Both have lines. Not long lines yet. Not the kind you see in news footage from hurricane zones. 10, 15 cars. But the lines are present, and they were not present 2 weeks ago. One station is cash only. The other is accepting cards, but the attendant told me the processing was intermittent, so cash was safer. Diesel was available at both. I topped off the van, took 20 minutes in line. The people in line were quiet, not angry, quiet.
Quiet is worse than angry. Angry means people still believe someone is responsible and that making noise will produce a response. Quiet means people have moved past that. Quiet means they are thinking, and when a line full of people is thinking instead of talking, every one of them is running the same calculation. How many more times can I do this before I cannot do this? Did you hear anything useful in line?
2 things. A woman ahead of me said the elementary school sent kids home early 3 days ago and is not reopened. She did not say why. She said, "They haven't told us anything," which is a different sentence than "the school is closed for repairs." It is the sentence of someone who was asked and been given nothing. The second thing came from the attendant when I paid. He said, "If you're heading north, go soon."
She looked at me over her notebook.
He did not elaborate. I did not ask him to, because the look on his face was the kind that means the sentence is the whole message, and there is nothing behind it except the instinct that made him say it.
I sat with that. The attendant was local. Locals hear things that travelers do not, because they are embedded in the network of small conversations that happen at the post office, at the church, at the kitchen table, in the slow accumulation of observations that a community makes about itself when the formal channels of information have gone unreliable. "If you're heading north, go soon" is not advice. It is a weather report from someone who can feel the pressure dropping. "The hardware store," I said.
Open, lightly staffed. The owner was behind the counter. He asked where I was camped, and I told him the Corps of Engineers campground. He said, "Good spot. Quiet out there." And then he said, "Probably going to stay quiet too. Town council had a meeting last night."
She stopped and turned a page in her notebook. The pause was longer than her other pauses, and I read it the way I read Shelby's ear orientation. Not what she said. What her body did before she said it.
I asked him what the meeting was about. He said road access. He said there had been discussion about limiting access to non-residents. He used the word discussion, which is a town council word for the decision has already been made and they are building the paper trail to justify it. He did not say when. He did not say which roads. He smiled when he said it, and the smile was the kind you give someone you are warning without being willing to say you are warning them.
I looked at the atlas, still open on the camp table between us. The primary route to the foothills ran along its eastern edge, close enough that a roadblock or a checkpoint or even an informal cluster of trucks parked across an intersection would require me to stop or reroute. The alternate route avoided the town entirely. The 41 extra miles I had calculated that morning had just shifted from probably unnecessary to probably essential.
I also saw something on the way back. About 4 miles out from town, someone has put up a hand-painted sign at the intersection of 74 and the county road. It says local traffic only. No authority on it, no name, no jurisdiction. Just paint on plywood leaned against a fence post.
The bridge on 74, the one the GMRS voice said was open yesterday. The bridge was open. The road leading to it was being claimed. We sat with the silence the way we had learned to sit with silence over the past 10 days. Not the silence of people who have nothing to say. The silence of people who have too much to say and are choosing which part of it matters enough to say out loud. Diane reached into her jacket pocket and set 2 small radios on the camp table between us. Black, compact, a little scuffed. The kind of FRS walkie-talkies you can buy at any outdoor retailer for $30, and the kind that most people never use after the first camping trip because their phones work fine, and talking into a radio feels like playing pretend.
I've been carrying these since before all of this. They're from a previous life, someone I traveled with for a while.
She did not name the person. She did not explain the relationship. The sentence was complete as she delivered it, and the slight tightening around her eyes when she said previous life told me the rest of the story was not mine to ask for. I recognized the economy. It is the same economy I use when people ask me about certain years in certain cities. You give them the fact. You keep the feeling.
I figured we could use a backup channel. Short range, no subscription, no satellite, just line of sight and a fresh set of batteries.
I picked one up. The battery compartment was clean. No corrosion. She had maintained them. That detail mattered to me more than she probably realized, because a person who maintains equipment they are not actively using is a person who believes the equipment will be needed again. That is either habit or foresight. In Diane's case, I suspected it was both. Channel and privacy code.
7 and 14. That's what we always used.
The word carried the weight of whoever had been on the other end of Channel 7, privacy code 14, in the life before this one. I let it pass. We all have frequencies that used to belong to someone else. Thank you. And I meant it with the specific weight that thank you carries when someone has given you something that costs them nothing in materials and everything in memory. Then I told Diane about the pop-up. Not immediately. I waited until the walkie-talkies were clipped to our belts and tested, Channel 7, privacy code 14, clear on both ends. I wanted the additional communication layer in place before I introduced information that might change the way she moved through the campground. The door opened sometime this morning, between my last perimeter check and 10:41 when I noticed. No vehicle arrived, no person visible. Shelby did not flag it. Diane looked toward the pop-up. From where we sat, it looked unremarkable. A door open on an unoccupied camper in a half-empty campground. The kind of thing you explain away and forget.
Wind?
Negligible all day. The bells haven't moved.
Latch failure?
Possible. A failed latch usually produces a door slightly ajar, not fully open. This door is standing at a 90-degree angle to the frame. That requires force, not gravity. She was quiet. She looked at the pop-up, then she looked at the truck camper at the far end of the loop. Then she looked at me. I watched her make the same geometric connection I had made 6 hours earlier. The pop-up sitting between us and him. The path through the campground that avoided the gravel road.
Has he moved today?
Once, 11:08. Filled a water jug at the spigot, 4 minutes visible. He did not look at the pop-up while he was outside, and he was deliberate about not looking at it.
Deliberate.
Deliberate. The neck tells you. When someone is avoiding looking at something, they hold their head at an angle that keeps it out of their sight line. It is a small thing. Most people would not catch it.
You caught it.
I catch things. That is what I do. She picked up the walkie-talkie from her belt and turned it over in her hand, not using it, holding it. The way you hold something that has just shifted from a gesture of generosity to a piece of operational equipment.
Do we check the pop-up?
Not now. Not in daylight with him potentially watching. Tonight, after dark. You and me and a flashlight and Shelby, who will tell us more in 10 seconds inside that camper than we could learn in 10 minutes.
And if someone is in there?
Then we know. And knowing changes the math. She accepted the plan and the timeline and the logic behind it. And I respected that she did not feel the need to modify it for the sake of having contributed a modification. Some people change a plan because it needs changing. Some people change a plan because they need to feel like they changed it. Diane was the first kind. The afternoon moved into evening the way November afternoons do when you are watching. Slowly at first, then all at once, as if the light had been holding on to something and finally let go. I made dinner over the fire ring, rice and beans with the last of a jar of salsa. Diane contributed a can of corn from her supplies and did not comment on the contribution, which is how contributions should work. You add what you have. You do not narrate the addition. We ate in the firelight and talked about the route, the fuel calculations, the margins, the difference between arriving with options and arriving on fumes.
I'll tell you in the morning.
Good. I did not push. Her uncertainty was hers. My job was to respect it the same way I respected her data.